After 8 years of disowning me from the family, they had the nerve to show up at my new mansion. Marcus opened the folder and spread the contents across my table like he was dealing cards. Bank statements. Property deeds. Court documents. Email printouts. And there, on top of everything else, a handwritten will in my mother's careful script. Has someone in your life ever tried to make you disappear when it benefited them? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to steal what's rightfully yours, this story will shake you to your core. 8 years ago, my own family erased me from existence with nothing more than a notarized paper and a room full of lies. They called me reckless, unworthy, undeserving of the family name. But last month, when they walked through my mansion gates expecting their share of my success, they had no idea I'd been collecting receipts for nearly a decade. Have you ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you? Has someone in your life ever tried to make you disappear when it benefited them? Do you know what it feels like to be legally invisible while watching others profit from your loss? Tonight, I'm calling out the problem that destroys families across America every single day: inheritance fraud that leaves good people with nothing while the greedy walk away rich. But here's what they don't expect: sometimes the erased fight back. Follow along as we uncover how I turned 8 years of exile into the most satisfying legal comeback you'll ever witness. The champagne glass hit the marble floor at 7:43 p.m. Not from celebration, from shock. They walked into my housewarming like they owned the place, because for 8 years, they thought they did. I didn't move from my spot by the fireplace. I counted the pieces of crystal scattered across my Italian marble, watched the bubbles die against the stone, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Recognition. My sister Rachel entered first, wearing pearls that cost more than most people's rent. Behind her came James, my older brother, straightening his tie like he was walking into a board meeting he already owned. Then Uncle David, and Patricia, and 3 cousins I'd barely spoken to since childhood. All of them dressed like they were attending their own coronation. Look at this place, Rachel breathed, running her fingers along my dining table. You've done so well for yourself. If your own family tried to erase you legally, would you fight back? Subscribe, you'll need the strategy one used. The irony wasn't lost on me. These were the same people who'd stood in a Fulton County courthouse 8 years ago, swearing under oath that I was too reckless to inherit a single dollar from our mother's estate. The same people who'd watched me pack everything I owned into a duffel bag and drive away with nothing. Now they were admiring my success like they'd helped build it. James walked over to the bar, poured himself 3 fingers of my bourbon, and settled into the leather chair like he belonged there. We should talk about family business, he said, swirling the glass. About making sure everyone gets their fair share going forward. Their fair share. Of my house. My business. My life I'd rebuilt from scratch. I nodded to Marcus, my lawyer, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner reading a newspaper. He didn't look up, just reached for the thick folder beside his coffee cup. Actually, I said, my voice steady as concrete, I think we should. Marcus stood, walked to the marble table where my family had gathered, and placed the folder in the center. The sound it made hitting the stone was sharp, final. Like a gavel. Ever been underestimated by people who should know better? Comment payback if you'd stay calm like I did. My sister's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. James stopped swirling his bourbon. Uncle David's smile cracked at the edges. What's this? Patricia asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. Marcus opened the folder and spread the contents across my table like he was dealing cards. Bank statements. Property deeds. Court documents. Email printouts. And there, on top of everything else, a handwritten will in my mother's careful script. When my lawyer slid that folder across the table, their royal smiles cracked like cheap paint. 8 years ago, the gavel fell at 2:17 p.m. in Fulton County. I walked out with a duffel bag and a notarized paper that made me legally invisible. I remember the courtroom smelled like floor wax and broken promises. My family sat in the front row, a united wall of navy suits and practiced sorrow. Their lawyer, a thin man with silver hair, spoke about my pattern of reckless behavior and clear inability to manage financial responsibility. They had documentation. Bank statements showing unpaid bills during my divorce. Credit card debt from when my ex-wife cleaned out our joint accounts. A DUI from 3 years earlier when I'd been stupid enough to drive home from a bar after finding out she was cheating. The deceased clearly intended for her estate to go to family members who could honor her legacy, the lawyer said, gesturing toward my siblings. Not to someone whose lifestyle choices demonstrate a fundamental lack of judgment. I sat alone at a small table with a court-appointed attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He shuffled papers, cleared his throat, and offered the kind of defense you get for free. Your Honor, while Mr. Thompson has faced some personal challenges, there's no evidence that his mother intended to disinherit him completely. But evidence was exactly what they had. Or what they claimed to have. James stood when called to testify. He wore his best suit, the one he saved for client meetings and funerals. His voice never wavered as he told the court about late-night phone calls from our mother, expressing concern about my drinking, my marriage falling apart, my inability to hold down steady employment. She specifically told me she was worried about leaving him anything substantial, James said, looking directly at the judge. She said she loved him, but she couldn't enable destructive behavior. Rachel nodded along from the gallery. Uncle David wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. A perfect performance of a family trying to protect their lost sheep from himself. The judge reviewed the will they presented. It looked official. Notarized. Witnessed by 2 people I'd never met. According to the document, our mother had left me $5,000, with love and hope for better choices, while everything else, the house, the business, the investments, nearly $500,000, went to my responsible siblings. Have you ever been judged by people who never bothered to know your story? I wanted to scream that I'd been taking care of Mom for 2 years while they visited twice a month. That I'd driven her to every doctor's appointment, filled her prescriptions, sat with her through chemotherapy while they sent flowers and cards. That her last words to me were, "Take care of yourself, baby. You're stronger than you know." But I had no proof. No documents. No witnesses. Just the memory of her hand in mine and a promise I'd apparently misunderstood. The paper said no remaining distributions assigned. But they missed something, a signature that wasn't theirs to forge. Highway 85 stretched ahead like a question mark. In my rearview mirror, Atlanta disappeared along with everything I thought I knew about family. The radio played old country songs about leaving and losing, but I turned it off. The silence felt more honest than Johnny Cash singing about hurt. My duffel bag sat in the passenger seat like a loyal dog, stuffed with 3 changes of clothes, a photo of my mother, and one document I'd kept hidden in my wallet, her original handwritten will from 2 years earlier. I'd found it cleaning out her bedroom dresser after the funeral, tucked inside a romance novel she'd been reading. 27 words in her careful handwriting: I want my boys to share everything equally. The house, the business, all of it. Take care of each other. Not legal enough for probate court. No witnesses. No notary stamp. Just a mother's wish written on notebook paper. But it was her handwriting. Her words. Her real intentions. Starting over with nothing sounds impossible until it happens to you. Subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild from zero. The highway signs counted down the miles to nowhere. Macon. Valdosta. Then Florida, then Texas, then wherever someone like me could disappear and start clean. I had $400 in cash, a credit card that wasn't maxed out yet, and the kind of anger that either destroys you or builds something stronger. I chose stronger. Somewhere outside Tallahassee, I pulled into a truck stop and bought a map. Not GPS, an actual paper map that I could spread across the hood of my car and trace routes with my finger. I needed to touch my future, make it real, draw a line from where I was to where I was going. West seemed right. Away from the humidity and the memories, toward dry air and second chances. What's the one thing you'd take if you had to start completely over? Texas called to me for reasons I couldn't name. Maybe it was the space, the promise that a man could reinvent himself under bigger skies. Maybe it was just far enough from Atlanta that my family's shadow wouldn't reach. I folded the map, got back in the car, and drove through the night with one hand on the wheel and one hand on my mother's handwritten will. 2 pieces of paper that said completely different things about who I was and what I deserved. The county courthouse version said I was reckless, unworthy, undeserving. My mother's notebook paper said I was loved, trusted, included. Only one of them was true. I kept one document they didn't know about, Mom's original handwritten will. Marcus read my mother's handwriting without blinking. Then he looked up and said, "This changes everything. But we'll need to be surgical about it." His law office sat above a Mexican restaurant in a small Texas town called Cedar Creek, 43 miles east of Dallas. The smell of fresh tortillas drifted up through the floorboards, mixing with the scent of legal books and black coffee. I'd been in Texas for 2 years by then, working construction during the day and researching inheritance law at the public library at night. I'd found Marcus through a newspaper article about a case he'd won against a family trust in Houston. The headline read, "Local Attorney Recovers Stolen Inheritance for Disabled Veteran." The story described how he'd uncovered forged documents and financial fraud that had cheated his client out of nearly $200,000. Family theft is more common than people realize, Marcus told me during our first meeting, examining my mother's handwritten will through a magnifying glass. Blood relatives think they can get away with anything because victims are too embarrassed to fight back. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a methodical way of asking questions. He'd grown up in East Texas, worked his way through law school, and specialized in estate fraud cases that bigger firms wouldn't touch. "Your mother's handwriting is distinctive," he continued, comparing it to a Christmas card I'd brought as a sample. "The letter formations are consistent. The paper quality matches what she used for grocery lists and notes. But we'll need scientific proof. Would you trust a lawyer who'd seen this before, or handle it yourself?" Marcus explained the process like a surgeon describing an operation. "First, we'd need forensic handwriting analysis to prove my mother's authentic will. Then we'd compare it to the probated version, looking for inconsistencies in signature patterns, pen pressure, and paper dating. If they forged her signature, they left evidence," he said. "Forgers always do. They trace too carefully, press too hard, or use different ink. The science doesn't lie." He opened a thick file cabinet and pulled out a folder marked, "Estate Fraud Cases, Active." Mine wasn't the first story he'd heard. Wasn't the worst betrayal he'd seen. Wasn't even the biggest dollar amount he'd recovered. But it might be the most satisfying to win, he said, studying the contrast between my mother's genuine handwriting and the official will. Because they made one critical mistake. He pointed to the signature on the probated will. It looked perfect to my untrained eye, every letter formed exactly like my mother's usual signature. But Marcus saw something different. "Your mother was left-handed," he said. "This signature was written by someone right-handed trying to copy her style. The pen strokes flow in the wrong direction. The traced signatures were good, but whoever did it used the wrong hand." Marcus opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder marked "Insurance Fraud, Family Cases." Mine wasn't the first. The bank records showed deposits on March 15th. The funeral was March 12th, someone was moving money before the tears dried. Marcus spread the financial documents across his desk like a detective laying out crime scene photos. Each page told a story my family thought they'd buried along with my mother. But computers don't lie, and banks keep everything. "Look at this timeline," Marcus said, pointing to a series of transactions highlighted in yellow. "Your mother died on March 10th. The funeral was March 12th. But someone started transferring assets on March 11th. The numbers didn't make sense unless you understood what really happened. $50,000 moved from Mom's savings account to a joint account with James's name on it. The family business checking account, cleaned out and reopened under Rachel's control. Even Mom's life insurance policy changed from me as beneficiary to a family trust managed by Uncle David. All of it happening while I was picking out her headstone. "This is criminal," I said, staring at the transfer receipts. "It's fraud," Marcus corrected. "But proving criminal intent requires more evidence. What we have here is a civil case with potential for triple damages. Financial fraud leaves digital fingerprints everywhere. Subscribe so you recognize the red flags before you get robbed." The paper trail stretched back months before Mom's death. Doctor visits where James suddenly appeared as her financial power of attorney. Bank meetings where Rachel signed as estate planning advisor. Legal consultations with attorneys I'd never heard of, all paid for from Mom's checking account. "They were planning this while she was still alive," Marcus said, his voice flat with disgust. "Look at these consultation fees. $5,000 to draft a new will. $3,000 for estate planning services. $1,500 for witness fees. Witness fees. That stopped me cold. You have to pay witnesses? Only if you're buying testimony, Marcus said. Legal witnesses to a will signing don't get paid unless someone's asking them to lie." He pulled out another document, a calendar printout from some digital system. Every appointment, every meeting, every financial transaction logged with time stamps that told the real story. March 8, 2:15 p.m., final will signing, witnesses confirmed, March 8, 3:30 p.m., asset transfer authorization, all accounts, March 9, 9 a.m., insurance beneficiary change, process immediately. Mom died on March 10. They'd finished stealing from her a full day before she took her last breath. Screenshot that timestamp in your mind. Sunday signatures tell a story. "But here's the smoking gun," Marcus said, sliding a bank receipt across the desk. "This property deed transfer. Signed and notarized at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning." I stared at the document. Mom's house, the 3-bedroom ranch where I'd grown up, where she'd lived for 38 years, transferred to James for $1 and other considerations. "The notary's office doesn't open until Tuesday," Marcus continued. "Banks are closed Sunday. Even mobile notaries don't work at 6 a.m. unless they're being paid extra to keep quiet." The deed was signed in a conference room at James's accounting firm. I knew because the address was printed at the bottom, the same building where he'd worked for 15 years. The same place he'd probably planned every detail of how to steal my inheritance. "They used his office because they controlled the environment," Marcus explained. "No witnesses except the ones they paid. No security cameras except the ones they could delete. No paper trail except what they wanted to create. But they'd made one mistake. Sunday morning at 6 a.m. meant they were rushing. Panicking. Trying to finish their fraud before Mom died and someone started asking questions. People in a hurry make sloppy errors. The property deed was signed at 6 a.m. on a Sunday. The office doesn't open until Tuesday." Dr. Patterson adjusted her glasses and delivered the verdict in 3 words. "Definitive document fraud. My mother never signed that will." The forensic handwriting laboratory in Austin looked more like a science classroom than a law office. Dr. Elizabeth Patterson had been analyzing question documents for 23 years, testifying in federal court cases involving everything from art forgeries to political scandals. She examined my mother's authentic handwriting samples under a high-powered microscope, measuring pen pressure, stroke angles, and letter formations with scientific precision. Then she compared them to the signature on the will that had stolen my inheritance. "The traced signature shows classic signs of simulation," Dr. Patterson explained, pointing to enlarged photographs on her computer screen. "See how the lines waver? That's someone trying to copy unfamiliar letter shapes rather than writing naturally." The science was fascinating and damning. Authentic signatures flow from muscle memory. Tiny variations in pressure and speed that happen without conscious thought. Forged signatures look perfect because the person creating them is concentrating too hard, trying to match every curve exactly. "Your mother wrote with her left hand," Dr. Patterson continued, "but this signature was created by someone right-handed. The pen strokes move in the wrong direction. A left-handed person pulls the pen across the paper. A right-handed person pushes it. Ever wondered how handwriting experts catch forgeries? The details will surprise you. She showed me microscopic photographs of the ink patterns. Real signatures have natural variations in line thickness as the pen moves faster or slower. Forged signatures maintain consistent pressure because the faker is moving deliberately, carefully copying each stroke. But the most obvious evidence is the paper itself, Dr. Patterson said, holding up 2 sheets under ultraviolet light. Your mother's authentic will was written on standard notebook paper from 2019. The forged will uses office paper with watermarks from 2021, 2 years after she died. The fraud wasn't just in the signature. It was in every detail they'd tried to fake. Patterson printed out her official analysis, 12 pages of scientific findings that would hold up in any courtroom. Charts showing stroke analysis. Chemical breakdowns of ink composition. Timeline evidence that proved the forged will was created months after my mother's death. In my professional opinion, she concluded, the signature attributed to your mother is a traced forgery created by someone attempting to simulate her handwriting. The document itself is fraudulent. I sat in her office holding scientific proof that my family had stolen everything. Not just money or property, they'd stolen my mother's voice, her intentions, her final wishes for her children. How confident are you in this analysis? I asked. Dr. Patterson smiled. Mr. Thompson, I've testified in over 400 cases. This is one of the clearest examples of document fraud I've ever examined. Any defense attorney trying to challenge these findings would be embarrassed in court. The traced signatures were good, but whoever did it used the wrong hand. The contractor asked if I was sure about the marble floors. I smiled and signed the check. Every tile was a promise I'd made to myself 8 years ago. Building my house in Dallas wasn't about showing off. It was about creating the perfect stage for justice. Every room designed with intention. Every detail chosen to send a message to the family that had tried to erase me. The dining room table could seat 12 people, exactly the right size for the confrontation I knew was coming. The bar was stocked with top-shelf bourbon, the kind my brother James always ordered but could never afford. The fireplace had a marble mantel wide enough to display family photos, the ones where I was still included. I'd spent 5 years building my construction business from nothing. Started with a pickup truck and basic tools, bidding on small jobs nobody else wanted. Bathroom renovations, deck repairs, kitchen updates for people who paid in cash and didn't ask too many questions about insurance. But I was good with my hands, reliable with deadlines, and honest about pricing. Word spread. Referrals led to bigger jobs. Bigger jobs led to commercial contracts. Commercial contracts led to the kind of money that bought marble floors and Italian leather furniture. Success is the best revenge, but planned confrontation is better. Subscribe, the next part gets intense. The house sat on 3 acres outside Dallas, surrounded by oak trees that had been growing longer than my family had been lying. I chose the location carefully, close enough to civilization for good phone service and reliable internet, far enough out for privacy when difficult conversations needed to happen. Marcus helped me design the home office where I kept copies of every document we'd collected. Fireproof filing cabinets. Digital scanners. A safe built into the wall behind a landscape painting my mother would have loved. You're preparing for war, Marcus observed during one of his visits. I'm preparing for truth, I corrected. War is what they started when they forged her signature. The hidden security cameras were Marcus's idea. 3 in the dining room, 2 in the living room, 1 covering the front entrance. Not for blackmail, for documentation. When my family finally showed up demanding their share of my success, I wanted video evidence of every word they said. They will come, Marcus predicted. Greedy people always do. The minute they hear you've made it, they'll convince themselves they deserve a piece. I'd been successful for 3 years before the first family member reached out. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since high school, suddenly interested in reconnecting after hearing I'd bought land and built a custom home. Then Rachel's Christmas card arrived. The first communication from my immediate family since the courthouse. Just a generic holiday greeting with a handwritten note. Hope you're doing well. We should get together soon. We should get together. After 8 years of silence, suddenly they wanted to get together. I wrote back with my address and an open invitation to visit anytime. Come see what their reckless, unworthy brother had built with the nothing they'd left him. I had Marcus's number on speed dial and 3 hidden cameras in the dining room. The letter arrived on cream-colored paper with a return address I'd memorized. They wanted to reconnect, now that I'd found success. James had always been the family politician, the one who handled difficult conversations with careful words and practiced charm. His letter read like a campaign speech, lots of talk about family values and moving forward, careful not to mention the 8 years of silence or the inheritance they'd stolen. Dear brother, it began, which almost made me laugh. When had James ever called me brother? Growing up, I was the kid, or mom's favorite, or whatever label fit his mood. Rachel and I have been talking about how much we miss having you in our lives. Family is everything, and we've let too much time pass without reaching out. We heard through mutual friends that you've built a beautiful home in Texas, and we're so proud of what you've accomplished. Proud. They were proud of what I'd accomplished with the nothing they'd left me. We'd love to come visit and catch up properly. There's so much we want to share with you about the family business, about Mom's legacy projects, about opportunities where we could all work together again. When fake family reaches out after ignoring you for years, what's your first thought? The letter was 3 pages long, filled with memories of childhood summers and family holidays, as if nostalgia could erase 8 years of legal fraud and financial theft. James wrote about Mom's garden, about the old fishing trips we'd taken as kids, about how she'd always wanted her children to stay close. We know there were some misunderstandings around Mom's estate, he continued, using the kind of soft language politicians prefer when they mean criminal fraud. But that's all in the past now. What matters is moving forward as a family. Misunderstandings. That's what he called forging our mother's signature and stealing my inheritance. The final paragraph was the real purpose of his letter. We're planning to visit Dallas for business next month and would love to see your new place. Maybe we could discuss some family investments, some ways to honor Mom's memory while building something together. Family investments. Translation: they wanted a piece of whatever I'd built. I read the letter 3 times, looking for any hint of apology or acknowledgement of what they'd done. Any recognition that their actions had consequences, that their greed had cost them a brother. Nothing. Just political language and fake sentiment, wrapped in cream-colored paper that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. I walked to my desk and pulled out a single sheet of my personal stationery. Heavy paper, clean lines, no decorative nonsense. The kind of paper that means business. My response was 4 words: Saturday. 7 p.m. Casual. No dear brother. No family memories. No discussion of the past or promises about the future. Just a date, time, and dress code for their reckoning. I wrote back with 4 words: Saturday. 7 p.m. Casual. They admired my art collection like they'd helped choose every piece. The champagne bubbled as they talked about our family's bright future together. Rachel arrived first, driving a BMW that still had temporary tags. She wore a black cocktail dress and pearls, the kind of outfit that said, successful but approachable. Behind her came James in a navy suit that fit too well to be off the rack, followed by Uncle David, Aunt Patricia, and 3 cousins whose names I'd almost forgotten. They moved through my house like they were touring a museum, commenting on the crown molding and hardwood floors, the custom kitchen island and wine refrigerator. Everything they saw became part of our family's success story. This is incredible, Rachel said, running her fingers along my dining room table. You have such wonderful taste. Mom would be so proud. Mom would be so proud. The same woman whose signature they'd forged to steal everything she'd wanted to leave me. James helped himself to my bourbon without asking, settling into my leather chair like he was reviewing my accomplishments for approval. The business must be doing well, he observed. Construction in Texas has really taken off. Have you ever watched someone dig their own grave with their words? I played the gracious host for the first hour. Offered drinks, showed them around, let them compliment my furniture and ask about my renovation projects. I wanted them relaxed, confident, ready to reveal their true intentions. Uncle David studied the family photos on my mantel, pictures from before the courthouse, when I was still part of their world. We should take some new family pictures, he suggested. Update the collection. Aunt Patricia nodded enthusiastically. It's been too long since we all got together. Family is everything. Family is everything. Funny how they remembered that after 8 years of treating me like I didn't exist. My other guests, neighbors, business partners, actual friends, watched the family reunion with polite curiosity. They knew the basic story: family problems, legal disputes, years of silence that had recently broken. But they didn't know the details, didn't understand the performance happening in front of them. James raised his glass in a toast. To family, he said. To second chances and bright futures. Everyone drank except me. I just watched their faces, memorized their smiles, waited for the mask to slip. It didn't take long. So, James continued, his voice casual but his eyes calculating, we've been talking about some family business opportunities. Ways we could all work together, pool our resources, honor Mom's legacy. Rachel leaned forward. The family business has been growing steadily. There's room for expansion, for bringing in new partners who understand the vision. New partners. They wanted me to invest in the business they'd stolen along with everything else. We know you've built something impressive here, Uncle David added. But imagine what we could accomplish working together. Mom always wanted her children to collaborate, to build something lasting. Mom always wanted. They kept invoking her memory like a weapon, using her ghost to justify their greed. Then my cousin James made the mistake that ended everything. We should discuss dividing the estate properly this time. Marcus didn't speak. He just opened the folder and let the documents tell the story. The room went cemetery quiet. The transition happened in seconds. One moment my family was toasting bright futures and second chances. The next moment they were staring at evidence that would destroy their lives. Marcus had been sitting in the corner reading a newspaper, invisible until he became the most important person in the room. He stood slowly, walked to the marble dining table where my family had gathered, and placed a thick manila folder in the center. The sound it made hitting the stone was sharp, final. Like a judge's gavel. What's this? Rachel asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. Marcus opened the folder without drama, without speeches, without warning. He simply spread the contents across my table like a dealer shuffling cards. Bank statements. Court documents. Property deeds. Email printouts. And there, on top of everything else, my mother's handwritten will in her careful script. Justice served cold hits different when you've got receipts. Subscribe if you believe in karma with paperwork. The room went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with politeness. This was the silence of people watching their world collapse in real time. Ice cubes clinked in glasses. Someone's watch ticked loudly. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. James set down his bourbon with shaking hands. I don't understand what we're looking at. Fraud, Marcus said simply. 8 years of systematic inheritance fraud, documented and verified. He pointed to the first document, Dr. Patterson's forensic analysis. This is a scientific examination of your mother's alleged signature on the will you probated in 2016. The conclusion, definitive forgery. Rachel's face went white. That's impossible. We had witnesses. You had paid witnesses, Marcus corrected, sliding their testimony across the table. Susan Martinez, $2,000. David Chen, $1,500. Both deposited the same day they signed sworn statements. Uncle David reached for the documents, but Marcus pulled them back smoothly. These are copies. The originals are already filed with the district attorney. The district attorney. They weren't just facing civil court anymore. This was criminal fraud, felony theft, conspiracy to commit forgery. The kind of charges that came with prison sentences. "You can't prove intent," my sister stammered, grasping for any defense that might save her. Marcus smiled and opened a second folder marked Email Evidence. "Actually, we can." He spread printouts of their digital communications across the table. Messages between James and Rachel planning the will forgery. Emails to Uncle David about handling the problem permanently. Text messages about paying witnesses and backdating documents. All of it time-stamped. All of it saved. All of it admissible in court. What's the most satisfying comeback you've ever witnessed? My favorite was an email from James to Rachel dated 3 days before our mother's death. "Everything is in place. Once the funeral is over, we can move the assets and finalize the estate transfer. He'll never be able to prove anything." Wrong, brother. I could prove everything. The financial records told the complete story. Asset transfers that happened before Mom died. Bank accounts emptied while I was planning her funeral. Property deeds signed in closed offices on Sunday mornings. "This timeline shows criminal conspiracy," Marcus continued. "Theft that began while your mother was still alive and continued for months after her death." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We're family. We were trying to protect everyone's interests." "You were trying to steal $250,000, I said, speaking for the first time since Marcus had opened the folder. "And you did steal it. For 8 years." The room felt electric. My other guests had stopped pretending to have separate conversations. Everyone was watching the family meeting that had turned into a criminal confession. James reached for the documents, but Marcus pulled them back. "These are copies. The originals are already filed." "You can't prove intent," my sister stammered. Marcus smiled and opened a second folder marked Email Evidence. The desperation hit them like a physical force. I watched my family's faces cycle through panic, anger, and calculation as they scrambled for any defense that might save their lives from complete ruin. James stood up fast enough to knock over his chair. "This is harassment. We're leaving." "Sit down," Marcus said quietly. "We're not finished." Something in his voice made James freeze halfway to the door. Maybe it was the tone lawyers use when they know they hold all the cards. Maybe it was the realization that running away wouldn't make the evidence disappear. Rachel tried a different approach. "Look, if there were mistakes in the probate process, we can work something out. Family should handle these things privately." "Mistakes?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You call forging our mother's signature a mistake?" "We never forged anything," Uncle David protested. "We followed proper legal procedures." Marcus reached into his folder again and pulled out a thick stack of printed emails. David Thompson to Rachel Thompson, March 8, 2016. "The signature practice is going well. I can copy Mom's handwriting perfectly now." The color drained from Uncle David's face like someone had pulled a plug. Rachel Thompson to James Thompson, March 9, 2016. "Once we get the witnesses paid and the documents notarized, this will all be over. He'll never know what hit him. Ever caught someone in a lie so big they couldn't climb out of it?" Patricia grabbed her purse. "We don't have to listen to this. These emails could be faked." "They're from your own email servers," Marcus replied calmly. "Recovered through legal discovery with full metadata intact. Date stamps, IP addresses, server logs. Everything verified by digital forensics experts." He spread more printouts across the table. Screenshots of text messages between family members coordinating their fraud. Bank transfer authorization signed in advance. Property deed templates prepared weeks before my mother died. James Thompson to David Thompson, March 11, 2016. "Move the money today. Once it's transferred, there's no paper trail back to us." My brother's hands shook as he reached for his bourbon. Those messages were taken out of context. What context makes inheritance fraud acceptable? I asked. James's political training kicked in. He straightened his tie, forced his voice steady. We were protecting family assets. You were drinking heavily, going through a divorce. Mom was worried about your judgment. So worried she wrote a different will in her own handwriting? Marcus held up my mother's notebook paper with her genuine signature. This will that leaves everything to her children equally? That's not legal, Rachel snapped. It's just a piece of paper. It's evidence of her true intentions, Marcus corrected. Combined with the forensic proof that your probated will is fraudulent, it establishes clear inheritance theft. The emails they'd sent to each other planning the fraud. Date stamped. Stored in cloud backup. Uncle David tried one last desperate play. Even if there were irregularities, the statute of limitations has passed. This happened 8 years ago. Marcus smiled like a poker player revealing a royal flush. The statute of limitations for inheritance fraud is 7 years from discovery, not occurrence. We discovered your fraud 6 months ago. We have 18 months left to prosecute. The room went silent except for the sound of ice melting in abandoned drinks and dreams crumbling under the weight of evidence. Mrs. Patterson from next door set down her wine glass and said, I was there when your mother signed the real will. Would you like me to testify? I'd forgotten she was at the party. Eleanor Patterson, 73 years old, had lived next door to my mother for 22 years. She'd been the quiet neighbor who brought casseroles during Mom's chemotherapy, who checked on her when I wasn't around, who probably knew more about our family dynamics than anyone else in that courthouse 8 years ago. My family turned to stare at her like she was a ghost materializing at their execution. Mrs. Patterson, Rachel said carefully, you must be confused. Mom's will was signed at the lawyer's office with proper witnesses. Eleanor Patterson had steel-gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been a school principal for 37 years before retirement, used to dealing with liars and troublemakers. I was there when your mother signed her real will, she repeated, her voice clear and strong. In her kitchen, on a Tuesday afternoon in February 2016. She asked me to witness it because she wanted someone trustworthy who wasn't family. Sometimes justice needs a witness with receipts. Who would be yours? James stepped toward her. Mrs. Patterson, with respect, you're elderly. Memory can play tricks. My memory is fine, she cut him off. Your mother specifically told me she was worried her children might fight over money after she died. She wanted everything divided equally between you and your brother. The old woman reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. She asked me to take pictures of the will signing as backup documentation. I still have them. The photographs were clear, detailed, damning. My mother sitting at her kitchen table, writing in her careful handwriting. Date stamp, February 23, 2016. 3 weeks before she died. She made me promise to keep these safe, Mrs. Patterson continued. She said family could be complicated when money was involved. Marcus examined the photos under his magnifying glass. These show your mother's authentic handwriting, consistent with the notebook paper we analyzed. Same pen, same paper, same signature patterns. Patricia made one desperate attempt at damage control. Those could be pictures of anything. She could have been writing grocery lists. Mrs. Patterson opened to another page in her album. Close-up shots of the handwritten text. I want my boys to share everything equally. The house, the business, all of it. Take care of each other. Does that look like a grocery list to you? The old woman asked. My family had no response. They stood in my living room holding empty glasses, surrounded by evidence that destroyed every lie they'd told for 8 years. I brought copies for your lawyer, Mrs. Patterson told Marcus. And I'm willing to testify in court about what I witnessed. Rachel sank into the nearest chair. This is insane. You're all acting like we're criminals. You are criminals, I said quietly. You stole from your own mother while she was dying, and you stole from me while I was grieving. I brought a copy of the photos I took that day, she continued. Your mother made me promise to keep them safe. They didn't apologize. They just left, one by one, until only James remained standing by my fireplace like he still belonged there. Rachel was the first to crack. She stood up abruptly, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door without a word. Her heels clicked on my marble floors like a countdown timer reaching 0. Uncle David followed, muttering something about lawyers and misunderstandings, but his voice lacked conviction. Aunt Patricia paused at the door, opened her mouth like she might say something, then thought better of it and disappeared into the Texas night. My cousins filed out in awkward silence, probably calculating how this family scandal would affect their own reputations and businesses. None of them had been directly involved in the fraud, but they'd all benefited from it, all accepted the story that I was too reckless to deserve my inheritance. When someone threatens you with, "This isn't over, what's your comeback?" The party guests who weren't family stayed, fascinated by the drama that had unfolded in front of them. Some offered quiet words of support. Others just stared at the evidence scattered across my dining room table, trying to process what they'd witnessed. James remained by my fireplace, nursing his bourbon like it might give him courage or clarity. His political composure had cracked, but he wasn't ready to surrender completely. "You think this makes you the hero?" he said finally. "I think this makes me right." "Right about what?" "That family should tear each other apart over money?" I walked over to stand beside him, both of us staring at the family photos on my mantel. Pictures from before the betrayal, when we were still brothers instead of strangers. "Families should protect each other," I said. "Not forge documents and steal inheritances." James finished his drink and set the glass down hard on my marble mantel. "Mom was worried about you. The drinking, the divorce, the debts. We were trying to protect her legacy." "By stealing it?" "By keeping it in responsible hands." I almost laughed. "Responsible hands?" "You moved $50,000 the day after her funeral. You transferred property on a Sunday morning in your office building. You paid witnesses to lie under oath. We did what we thought was best. You did what was best for you." James straightened his jacket, trying to recover some dignity. "This won't end here. We have lawyers too." "Good," I said. "They can represent you in criminal court." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. The brother who'd taught me to throw a baseball, who'd helped me fix my first car, who'd stood beside me at Dad's funeral 15 years earlier. "I hope you're happy," he said. "I'm not happy," I replied. "I'm just done being robbed." Marcus was packing up his files, securing the evidence that would destroy my family's freedom and reputation. Mrs. Patterson sat in her chair like a satisfied judge, having delivered the testimony that sealed their fate. "What happens next?" I asked Marcus. "Now we file criminal charges. The district attorney will handle prosecution. You'll get your inheritance back, plus damages, plus interest." As James reached the door, he turned back. "This won't end here." I smiled. "No. It'll end in court." The judge didn't need to deliberate. He looked at the evidence for 3 minutes and said, "Motion granted. Assets restored." The courtroom in Dallas County looked nothing like the one in Fulton County where I'd lost everything 8 years earlier. This time I sat at the plaintiff's table with Marcus beside me, surrounded by boxes of evidence that told the truth instead of lies. My family's lawyers had tried every defense they could think of. Statute of limitations. Lack of standing. Procedural challenges. Motion after motion filed to delay the inevitable. None of it worked. Judge Martinez was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd seen every kind of family fraud case imaginable. She reviewed our evidence with the methodical attention of someone who'd spent 20 years separating truth from fiction. Dr. Patterson's forensic analysis took 30 minutes to present. The handwriting expert walked the court through every detail of the forgery, from pen pressure to stroke direction to paper dating. She showed enlarged photographs that made the fraud obvious to everyone in the room. Justice delayed but not denied. "What would you do with your victory?" "The scientific evidence is overwhelming," Judge Martinez said. "The signature on the probated will is demonstrably fraudulent. Marcus presented the financial records next. Bank transfers, property deeds, insurance changes. All of them happening while I was planning my mother's funeral, all of them signed by people who had no legal authority to move those assets. These transactions show clear criminal intent, the judge continued. Assets were stolen through systematic fraud over an extended period. My family's lead attorney made one final desperate argument. Your Honor, even if there were irregularities in the estate processing, this is a civil matter between family members. Criminal prosecution seems excessive. Judge Martinez looked at him like he'd suggested the earth was flat. Counselor, forgery is a felony. Inheritance theft is a felony. Conspiracy to commit fraud is a felony. This case involves all three. Mrs. Patterson testified via video link, her photos displayed on courtroom monitors. The images of my mother signing her real will were clear, detailed, impossible to dispute. The witness testimony corroborates the forensic evidence, Judge Martinez ruled. The deceased's true intentions are clearly established. The criminal charges came next. James, Rachel, and Uncle David were arrested as they left the courthouse. Felony fraud, conspiracy, forgery in the first degree. The kind of charges that carried 5 to 10-year prison sentences. Furthermore, Judge Martinez continued, given the systematic nature of this fraud and the length of time involved, this court awards triple damages plus interest and attorney fees. Triple damages. My original inheritance of $250,000 became $750,000, plus 8 years of compound interest, plus Marcus's legal fees. The total came to just over $1 million. Assets will be restored within 30 days, the judge ruled. The defendants will make full restitution plus penalties as outlined in this judgment. I sat in that courtroom listening to justice finally being served, thinking about my mother's handwritten words, "Take care of each other." They hadn't taken care of me. But I'd taken care of the truth. Marcus shook my hand as we left the courthouse. How does it feel? Like I can finally breathe, I said. The court awarded triple damages for fraud. I was now worth more than they'd ever stolen. I kept my mother's original handwriting framed on my office wall. Not for revenge, for remembrance of who deserved my loyalty. 6 months after the court victory, my life had settled into something I'd never experienced before, peace. Real peace, built on truth instead of lies, on relationships earned instead of inherited. The money helped, of course. Having my inheritance restored plus damages meant financial security I'd never imagined possible. But the real victory wasn't the bank balance, it was waking up every morning without the weight of injustice pressing on my chest. James got 4 years in federal prison. Rachel got 3. Uncle David, because he cooperated with prosecutors and testified against the others, got 2 years and probation. All of them lost their professional licenses, their businesses, their reputations in the community where they'd spent their entire lives. I felt sorry for them sometimes. Late at night, when the house was quiet and I was reading in my mother's favorite chair, I'd remember childhood Christmas mornings and family vacations before greed poisoned everything we'd shared. But sorry doesn't mean I regretted seeking justice. The most powerful comeback isn't revenge, it's becoming the person they said you'd never be. What's your comeback story? I used part of the settlement to establish something my mother would have loved, the Eleanor Thompson Foundation for Inheritance Justice. We help people who've been cheated by family members, who don't have the resources to fight fraud in court, who need lawyers like Marcus and experts like Dr. Patterson. Family theft is an epidemic, Marcus told me during our first foundation meeting. Most victims never fight back because they can't afford the legal costs or they're too embarrassed to admit their own relatives robbed them. We've helped 63 people in 6 months. A veteran whose brother stole his disability benefits. A widow whose children emptied her bank accounts. An elderly man whose caregiver forged power of attorney documents. Every case reminded me why justice matters more than family harmony. Mrs. Patterson became the foundation's first board member. At 73, she had more energy than people half her age and a lifetime of experience dealing with dishonest people. Your mother would be proud, she told me during one of our planning meetings. She always said you had the strongest sense of right and wrong of all her children. The strongest sense of right and wrong. Maybe that's why they tried so hard to erase me from her life. I kept their old family photos on my mantle, but I added new ones. Pictures with Marcus and his family. Mrs. Patterson at foundation events. My construction crews celebrating project completions. People who'd chosen to be in my life instead of people who'd been stuck with me by blood. The business continued growing. Word spread that I was reliable, honest, someone who delivered what he promised on time and on budget. Clients referred me to friends. Projects led to bigger projects. Success built on trust instead of theft. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. If I wish things had ended differently, if I'd rather have family relationships than legal victories. The answer is complicated. I miss the people I thought they were before I learned who they really were. I miss the idea of having brothers and sisters who would protect me instead of rob me. I miss the fantasy of family that exists in Christmas movies and greeting cards. But I don't miss the reality of being betrayed by the people who should have loved me most. If this story inspired you to fight for what's rightfully yours, remember, the truth always leaves fingerprints. Sometimes you just need to know where to look for them. The truth won't make your family love you, but it might help you love yourself enough to build something better with people who deserve your loyalty. What would you have done differently in my shoes? Comment below and share your own story of justice served cold.